We are running a bit late, and so we're going to start the academic showcase and do a few, and then go on to afternoon tea and do the rest later. We'll see where we reach at 3:30. So can I please have the first speaker, Ms. Zudia Emania from University of Mataram, Indonesia. So these are going to be, that's not, yeah, please come. These are going to be Pecha Kucha style 3-minute, 20-second presentations. And we're going to try and keep to time. You'll get a warning at 1 minute and then get a warning at 20 seconds. Is that okay? And that is it. Yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Zudia from University of Mataram, together with my partner Latifah from Meteorology, Climatology, and Geophysics College, and also Zaki Zamani from 11 Maret University. Thank you for the ICCC committee for the opportunity to present our research about climate change adaptation by coastal farmers in Sekotong district in food crop cultivation. And the climate change is a global phenomenon that causes long-term change in the earth temperature, rainfall, and atmospheric condition. In general, the primary cause of the climate change are human activities and also natural factors. The climate change impacts all living things on the earth, including farmers and also cultivation area. With the environmental characteristic, with the diverse topography, uncertain rainfall, low groundwater availability for the agriculture, this requires further study about climate change occurs so that farmers can be better prepared to adapt if the El Nino event occurs in some area. In this research area, the Sekotong district, part of North Lombok Island, is a coastal area characterized by low rainfall, dominated by anti-salt soil that have low fertility. During the El Nino event, the rainfall decreased and it resulting in crop failures. Therefore, the climate change adaptation efforts are crucial to ensure the sustainability of the agriculture in Sekotong district. In this research, we use a mixed method approach combining a qualitative and also quantitative methods from spatial data analysis and direct interviews with farmers in the field. The result is we analyzed the groundwater availability and classified the elevation based on spatial data and satellite image processing. And then the result we compared, used the Pearson correlation and described the relation between the two variables. And also the qualitative approach was used to understand the farmers' adaptation to face the climate change. And what we found, the result is the elevation classes into 5 classes, and the water availability was classified into 5 classes too. And the Pearson correlation analysis indicates a very strong and negative relation between the two variables. The farmers' adaptation are dominated by changing cropping pattern, constructing irrigation, and substituting some varieties. The farmers in coastal area are implementing adaptation models according the topography and availability of the water in that area. It will contribute to anticipate the drought in cultivation area and encourage the application of simple climate change adaptation model and also to contribute the scientific literature. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, that was great. Can we please have Professor Ramawati from Sumatera Utara, Indonesia? Do you have the clicker with you? Sorry. Okay, I'll set it up. Yeah, this one. This one. And that's it. And you can start now. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to present part of our research about land suitability for food crops, support a resilient food system, and the achievement of sustainable development goals in Batang Toru, South Tapanuli, North Sumatra, Indonesia. I'm Rahmawati from Universitas Sumatera Utara. What is the problem? There is a limited public knowledge and understanding regarding land suitability for food crop cultivation. Accurate science-based land suitability evaluation for food crops, especially rice and corn in this region, has never been conducted. The main opportunities of this study, the first one is improving land productivity through better soil management, utilizing GIS-based land suitability map, strengthening food system resilience and sustainability, aligning agricultural development with SDGs, and empowering local communities. Why does it matter? This study matters because it directly addresses the foundation of sustainable agricultural food security and environmental resilience. How is this research? This research addresses the identified problem by applying a scientific, database, and spatial approach to evaluate land suitability for food crops, ensuring the agricultural development in Batang Toru. This is the step of our research, start from field survey and soil sampling, laboratory analysis, data matching with land suitability criteria, using GIS, identification of limiting factor and potential improvement, and interpretation and recommendation. Based of our research, we found that the land suitability, actual land suitability for Oryza sativa is marginally suitable. And actual land suitability for zeamais are marginally suitable and currently not suitable. This study makes a significant difference because it transfers agricultural development in Batang Toru from traditional assumption-based land use into a science-based, spatial-informed, and sustainable system. This study contributes to sustainable agricultural development and food system resilience, evidence-based land use planning, climate-smart and environmentally responsible farming, and scientific advancement in land suitability assessment using GIS. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
That was great. Thank you so much. Thank you. Can you please have Ms. Atifeh from RMIT University?
Hi everyone, this is a little bit of a different presentation, but it's a higher level decision making. I'm going to talk about the complexities of decision making when it comes to health and climate resilience policies, and it's part of my PhD. here in RMIT Center for Urban Research. The problem is, like, whenever we make decisions and policy is made in complex contexts, it's always accompanied by conflicting agendas and unintended consequences. For example, if we create a green area, we may bring about gentrification by it, and when we're transitioning to renewable energy, there would be justice and equity issues. My research is an attempt to look at these things from a systemic and holistic viewpoint, and within the realm of water resilience and urban health. So the decisions are framed in a three-layer conceptual framework. First of all, the decisions are connected to the components of systems involved and their interactions together. And the second layer would be the approaches in the decision-making, whether we have a justice-based approach, a health equity, or in agriculture, we heard from others about the approaches. And also the planning context, which brings about opportunities and constraints in decision-making. And out of all of these, from a complex context, qualities like water resilience and urban health will emerge. So how we mapped the processes, the first step was developing the network of components of a healthy and water resilient urban area. We then mapped the approaches and planning context using interviews, and then I am developing causal relationships and feedback loops. They're not done yet. This is the network of a healthy and water resilient urban area. I know there's a lot happening. We identified about 20 components and about 200 components, and about 300 relationships. And it shows that when we're talking about health or water resilience, we're talking about multiple systems within a context, from transport, housing, health system, food systems, employment, and all of that. Then we interviewed people, experts and practitioners, to capture the approach and planning context. And this is still being analyzed, so a lot of themes are coming out of this. I just brought in an example. For example, if we have an opportunistic pathway to creating a green area, we would get a lot of positives out of it. We would have an easier land acquisition, better funding, involvement of other organizations, but we also get a lot of negative in, for example, equitable access, less role of a council, and less community involvement. All of that, this approach, this holistic and systemic understanding, would help us move towards a different way of policy and decision-making, a higher level policy and decision-making that takes into account the complexity of the context. Thank you.
Professor Margaret Rosaria from Indonesia. I'm Retno Rosaria.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Retno Rosaria Stuti from Soil Science, Department of Soil Science Agriculture, Faculty of Universitas 11 Maret, Surakarta, Indonesia. I'll present my paper, Study of the Ability of Biduri Plant in Bioremediation of Pesticides with Indigenous Bacteria and Biochar and Shared Planting Soil Purpose Regions in Indonesia. The problem was climate change impact is changes in rainfall pattern and increased pest attacks. Agricultural management must be done to increase crop yields. Pesticides have a role in eradicating pests and diseases, but pesticide can cause pollution in the environment because it has exceeded the maximum residue limit on soil, 0.1 ppm. The opportunities was the using of bioremediation technology. Bioremediation is any pest process that uses organisms or their enzyme to return the polluted environment to its original condition. Bioremediation technology needs bioremediation agents like hyperaccumulator plants, bacteria, and biochar. Why does it matter? Because Brebes Regency is the largest shallot producer in Indonesia. Most shell farmers in Brebes still use excessive inorganic fertilizers and synthetic pesticides, especially chlorpyrifos, to increase yields. The use of pesticide there caused pollution in the environment because it left residue over than 0.1 ppm. This was an experiment research in pots and in greenhouse. The soil used was soil contaminated with pesticide from shallot plantations in Brebes amounting 7 kg per pot. Bioremediation agents used were biduri plant as pesticides absorber, indigenous bacteria, and coconut shell biochar. There were several activities that we did during the research, like preparation of planting media, bacterial inoculum, inorganic fertilizers, biochar, seeds, and then planting biduri for 60 days, maintenance, harvest, and laboratory observation. We found that during bioremediation process, biduri plants can grow well and can absorb soil pesticide treatment. With the highest dry weight was treatment of bacterial consortium plus biochar that was 40% higher than control, also highest in pesticide absorbed by biduri that was 70 higher than control. What difference did it make? It made the differences in the soil pesticide levels, with the soil pesticide decreased by about 70.57 to 98%. Treatment of bacterial consortium plus biochar had the highest bioremediation effectiveness, that was 98%. The result of this research was that the combination of biduri plant, indigenous bacteria, and or without biochar can reduce soil pesticide levels and increase soil pesticide absorption by biduri plant. So it will contribute to clean the soil from chlorpyrifos contaminants, save land for planting, support SDGs 3, 12, and 15. And the best treatment was the treatment of bacterial consortium biochar, which has no significant difference with treatment of pesticide SP without and with biochar. Thank you.
Can we have Ms. Nipunika from RMIT University next?
Have you ever flown over Australia or maybe seen photographs of regional landscapes of Australia? And did you ever wonder what are those tiny, shiny ponds scattered all over the landscape? So for us down under, these little ponds known as farm dams are the major source of water for livestock and crop irrigation. In fact, in Australia alone, there are over 1.76 million dams, but unfortunately, this is the present status of most of the dams, polluted and unsustainable. On top of that, according to recent estimates, it has been found that these dams release large amounts of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane, making the situation much worse. Given the importance of sustainable management of these dams, over the past decade, different interventions have been developed, such as fencing around a farm dam to limit livestock access and planting or revegetating in and around the dams. But the real challenge is most of these interventions often comes with a high upfront cost that diminishes the stakeholder investment and involvement on this concept. But if we could make these unmanaged dams into nature positive assets, they could be hubs of nutrient cycling, biodiversity hotspots, as well as secure water for future agriculture needs and improve farm productivity and farm profits, along with making these systems climate resilient ecosystems. So in my PhD research, I aim to bridge this gap by integrating ecological science, social science, and environmental economics to make farm dam enhancement financially feasible and environmentally sound. And today, in this presentation, I will be giving you a quick highlight on the environmental economics chapter of my thesis through a cost-benefit analysis of enhanced farm dams. So in this study, we estimated the specific cost of enhancing a farm dam for a package of management interventions as mentioned. And as the benefits, we considered both carbon as well as non-carbon benefits. And when it comes to the carbon benefits, given the absence of a standard carbon accounting methodology for farm dams, we relied upon a hypothetical carbon accounting framework that could capture most of the elements of an enhanced farm dam. So according to our results, we found that while carbon credits cannot alone offset the cost of enhancing a farm dam, it could contribute to about 37% of the benefits. And the non-carbon benefits, which is the highest contributor of this economic model, we could suggest that bundling both carbon and non-carbon benefits could be a promising avenue to incentivize landholders and support the carbon neutral agriculture. And also moving on to the another step in this research, we actually we projected scenarios by changing the carbon credit price over the years, and we could, it was evident that higher the carbon credit price lead in future, which is a more likely situation to happen by year 2035, this would promote or lead to greater returns on investment and could improve the economic viability of this economic case of enhancing a dam. So finally, this research will contribute to and provide actionable insights and practical strategies to support and make the farm dam enhancements financially viable. And also this is an effort to make conceptual changes among landholders to support carbon neutral agriculture across farm dams in Australia. So in that being said, I'll be concluding my presentation. Thank you.
Can you please have Professor Vidyarthini Devi from Indonesia?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Widyatmani Devi from Universitas Prasmarat, Indonesia. I will present the strategic review of biofilm biofertilizer for climate resilience RISE, spotlighting the potential Indonesian-Australian collaboration. RISE feed for over 4 billion ASEAN people, including 218 million Indonesian. But climate change threatens rice yield up to 20% losses. We urgently need resilient solution to protect food security. Biofilm biofertilizer are microbial consortia in sticky exopolysaccharide. This structure improves survival, nutrient delivery, and stress tolerance, helping rice resist droughts, salinity, and disease. Biofilm biofertilizer outperform conventional types. They boost yield, reduce emission, and restore soil health, advancing SDGs and on hunger, climate action, and life on land. We conducted a systematic review on bibliometric analysis using Scopus, Mendeley, and VOS Viewer, mapping co-authorship, citation, and keyword trends in climate resilient agriculture. And we find that from this finding, There are two standout. Global publications are rising, and biofilm biofertilizer show real promise for food security and climate resilience. This research reveals a path from lab to policy. Future study will expand potential to more crop and stress type through collaboration between Universitas 11 Maret and Australia and also other countries. Indonesian microbial richness and Australian biotech strength form a powerful synergy. Together, we can lead tropical biofilm biofertilizer innovation to build climate resilient agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions from the audience? No? Maybe you can prepare some. We'll have some time in the next session. Can I please have Mr. Miftah Widadgada from Indonesia? Thank you so much.
Yeah, okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Miftah Farid Widagda, and today, alongside my colleagues, Mahbub Murtioso, I am excited to present our paper on the Environmental Management Assessment Scheme, or EMAS. Already we have published the book now. Our focus is addressing the complex challenge of assessing environmental, social, and economic performance for industries, particularly in Indonesia. But more than that, we see a significant opportunity for EMAS to evolve into a novel standard for assessment across the ASEAN region and even here in Australia. Why EMAS matters? We identify two critical gaps in current community empowerment program. First, many programs, well-intentioned, fail to fully address the most pressing social and environmental needs of the community they are meant to serve. Second, from a business perspective, this program often become a cost center, a budget line for compliance or charity that provide no tangible, no strategic or measurable benefit back to the company. This framework is designed as an alternative. It's an approach both planning and evaluation that integrates a real social and environmental impact while simultaneously ensuring the program provide added value and strategic alignment for the company. We use the logical framework that EMAS is not just about physical environmental impact, but it's equally assess the economic, social, and human well-being dimension. We use the 10 indicator in EMAS, like the environmental, economic, social, well-being, and then we move to more strategic metric like SROI, social return on investment, creating share value, and then finally we measure the contribution to biodiversity aspect, the quality of stakeholder engagement, and the proximity for the program in the local community and the effectiveness of the governance. We divide into three categories: high, medium, and low. And in my case study, we use this method. We use the assessment for conduct three case studies in Indonesia, and the first one in Kampung Gambut Berdikari in Riau, Bengkalis, and the second is water breaker flying as bottom us in Bekasi, West Java, and the third is agroforestry, coffee agroforestry in Wonosobo, Central Java. In this method, we measure the 10 impact of the program, and we can look what the program is more give the positive impact for the local environment. It is the spider web chart, and we can show the bar. We can use this method for make sure the CSR program of the industry can make a bigger impact for the local community. Okay, I think this is my presentation. Thank you all. Good afternoon. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much. We have Professor Wibowo from Indonesia.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name Agung Wibowo. I am from Indonesia. I present our paper with title Climate Change Adaptation Based on Local Wisdom, Transforming Home Industry Toward a Sustainable Circular Economy in Market Emergency. Climate change has significant impact on home industry, which serve as a backbone of local economy. Market emergency with a strong traditional and agrarian foundation illustrate how communities respond to climate change through home industry such as Sitomukti Batik, leather, bamboo weaving, and traditional food processing. The local wisdom of the market and community serve as crucial social capital for climate change adaptation. Research method, the study was conducted in Magetan Regency as Java Province, Indonesia. The study adopt a constructive paradigm which posits the social reality is shaped by experience, value, and perception of individual or group within species, social, and culture. The study employs a descriptive qualitative approach. Research and discussion. The impact of climate change on sustainability of home industry, availability of raw material, decreased productivity and product quality. Example, defect in the product such as imprecise shifting, leather color that varies greatly, or shape that does not meet market standard. The decline in the quality of animal feed affect the health of cattle. Example, many crows experience suboptimal growth. Their skin become thinner, drier, and they are even susceptible to skin disease such as scabies. Production process, high temperature can accelerate the deterioration of raw material. Example, melinjo or cassava that is exposed to excessive heat for too long will change its taste. Distribution and market. Distribution disrupted. Example, rural-urban modes often block access, hindering the delivery of emping, cheap, and dairy product. Impact social and labor aspect, worker vulnerability. Example, when harvest decline due to extreme weather, they choose to work as construction worker and migrate to the city, so that the home industry lack skilled labor. Economic sustainability, rising production, leader craftsmen in Kawadanan and Garut, cheap production, panic and first using cost. Strategy, adaptation strategy based on local wisdom, adjustment of productive production time. Business owner adjust their production schedule Impact home industry players are able to reduce the risk of raw material loss, making it more economical and environmentally friendly. Product and business diversification. When primary raw material are difficult to obtain due to climate change, adding value because fermented products have a stable market and strong local culture. Utilization of appropriation energy and technology, several business groups have begun to utilize simple technology such as solar powered drying oven or biomass. Home industry can continue to product throughout the year without being too affected by extreme weather condition. Circular economy development strategy in Magetan, utilization of appropriate energy and technology, several business groups have begun to utilize simple technology such as solar power drying oven or biomass. Impact production resilient, the business more cost effective and environmentally friendly. Conclusion, climate change adaptation based on local wisdom serve as guide driver in transforming home industry in Magetan agency toward sustainable circular economy. Local wisdom has proven highly relevant in addressing climate change that affect raw material availability, production process, and distribution system. Moreover, the environmental impact is equally significant as waste material reports into new resource, reducing ecological pressure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we're all ready to go for afternoon tea now. We'll resume back here at 4 p.m. with Ms. Nadine.